there are very, very few brands that the consumer recognizes as instantly as global luxury brands. And it's a very, very short list. And I couldn't be more thrilled that I am with Christie's International Real Estate, because we are absolutely one of them. But we're still talking about people and being a people business, and especially in the luxury end, that's even more critical. Nobody wants to be pushed and sold. They want to be advised and guided. And so the best advisors are really focusing on how to build those relationships, but also they need to demonstrate that they have an elevated level of knowledge. You actually have to understand what's happening in the global economy. You have to understand what's driving your client, in terms of their personal lives, their financial lives. And we often say, especially when you're talking at the luxury end, the property is part of a portfolio. It's not just necessarily the one place where they put a roof over their head.
Welcome. I am super excited to introduce my guest today, Gavin Swartzman, president of Christie's International Real Estate. Gavin and I go way back, and I have had the opportunity to really have a front row seat at how he thinks about growth, leadership, and luxury. We have connected through many different organizations that we won't name them all in case we leave someone out, but most recently through his work with Peerage Realty and Sotheby's International, and now as president of Christie's International Real Estate. So Gavin, for the listeners who aren't familiar with you, would love for you to share a little bit about what you're working on at Christie's and your top priorities and focuses.
Well, thank you. And it's so great to see you. Obviously, we do go back a long way, and it's just been a really great, collaboration over the years. So thank you very much for hosting me. So to give you kind of an update, kind of where I'm at with Christie's, I think one thing that's really important is that my very first exposure to luxury real estate from the very earliest days when I entered the industry was through Christie's International Real Estate, because the very first partner company that was part of Peerage Realty Partners is Chestnut Park, which is a Christie's affiliate. So it very much was formative in framing the strategy and sort of my own views about the segment of the industry that I felt we could best focus and compete in. And so it's just an interesting to now have the privilege to be able to work with the brand directly. And so it's super exciting for us, because the way I think about it is, especially us as industry insiders, we look at brands as industry insiders. We don't look at it as much through the eye of the consumer. And when it comes to the consumers, what I always say is that there are very, very few brands that the consumer recognizes as instantly as global luxury brands. And it's a very, very short list. And I couldn't be more thrilled that I am with Christie's International Real Estate, because we are absolutely one of them. So we sort of start from that positive consumer sentiment towards what this brand stands for and what their expectations are whenever they interact with the brand and the people who represent it. So we sort of start with that really strong advantage. And then what I find really cool about it is just my passion is working with independent partners and operators. It's kind of been what I've been doing all my career. So I get to work with people like that across the globe, and then bring them the kind of resources that they might not have access to directly. And so that combination of global brand, resources that are incredible, and nothing better than local ownership to really bring it to life is just a really great privilege.
Yeah. Well, an interesting note about you and just knowing you is that you're about the consumer with the companies you work for, and you're also very much about the advisors and the leadership within the teams that you're working with. And I think those all have to play hand in hand, where oftentimes from a corporate level, we see, it's a top-down approach of thinking about the owners of the brokerages and the firms or franchises, and then it's about the advisors, and then it's about the client. So I really appreciate how you're taking a reverse look at it to make sure that, the clients are our clients and the advisors are our clients as leadership. And then, as the same for your leaders within your different franchises. So I think this is
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, let's face it. I know there's so much discussion around technology and AI, and then they've all got these, really important roles to play. we're still talking about people and being a people business, and especially in the luxury end, that's even even more critical. And so everything's got its place, but it's really still very much people driven.
Yeah. Well, because it's you, I'm sure I'll take you all over the place and not follow any type of rhyme or
Oh,
reason with
let's do
questioning.
it.
So,
Let's do it.
um,
We
let's
can
start.
handle it.
Yeah, let's start with the one thing that I got my hands on. What probably about a
But
month or so ago, the Christie's 2026 Global Luxury Perspectives Report. There is so much information in there, and I know there's a lot of different places that we go to find information on luxury real estate. And this, to me, really like what we launched the call with today, is it really ties together the consumer, the advisor, and then how Christie's International as a whole plays a role in the process. So, I can start with all the acronyms, the PSI and all the things, but before we kick it off, tell us a little bit about that Global Luxury Perspectives report, just high level, what you guys found, what you based it on,
mhm.
and that Prime Sentiment Index.
Yeah. So, thank you. So we wanted to do something different with how we looked at it, and so we sort of focused very much, on this report being perspectives that we were getting from across our global network, as well as from our colleagues at the auction house, as opposed to being sort of prescriptive in forecasting, because we really think it's quite a nuanced category, and there's so much going on. But in the end, we wanted to encapsulate it into something that we could kind of keep score with. And so we came up with this proprietary, calculation that we're calling, the Prime Sentiment Index. And the theory behind it is that when you look at charts and graphs and stuff, they're kind of are after the fact. There's a there is a the spark comes from the sentiment that the consumer is feeling to trigger an action. And that's across almost every category, but it becomes more and more the case as you move up the food chain. So we thought, let's find a way where we could capture what that sentiment looks like as kind of how we see the market based on that input, and then we'll tweak and track and see how we do. So basically what the index shows right now is that we're in a overall positive sentiment market, but one that is balanced and rational. And so, what that really means is that, especially and this is, really focused around the luxury space, is that people are going to be very purposeful and intentional about making their decisions. But when they feel good and comfortable, they will make that call. So it's not it's not this like irrational frothy market, and it's not a negative market. It's like right sort of right in the middle of sort of balance between you know supply and demand and that sort of stuff that you would expect.
Mhm. Well, and let's start with the consumer side of that, and then we'll advance into the advisor side of it. So, in the report, and you think about what's happening, that recalibration, less urgency, more intentional decision making. Like you said, it's a strong market. It's a good market. It is supply and demand driven, honestly, because we are, and we'll get to multi generational, but we're seeing properties not exchange hands as much or as often. So when you think about this shift into that less urgency and more strategic and selective through the lens of the buyer, what does that mean for how deals are getting done today?
So I mean, the first one is that there needs to be something exceptional about the property and something that's really special about it. And then price comes into the equation. Is people will pay a fair value, but people are disciplined. And as I talk about at the luxury end and high net worth, there's this misnomer that they're not rational. They're extremely rational.
Yeah.
The difference is that they have the resources to act with conviction when they feel all the ducks are lined up and they feel good about it. So it's it's no different than one would be at other ends of the spectrum in the real estate space. Frankly, it's just the resources to act with conviction when they feel good about it, because you can feel good at a different end, but maybe there's other reasons why it's not right. But so I think that it sets up advisors to be really intentional with how they work with their clients. And you've known me for a long time, so the two words that come out of my mouth more frequently than anything else: trusted advisor, trusted advisor. And so I think it's the time for a trusted advisor to really show their worth, because they can advise their clients on how to get deals done in this environment, because deals are getting done. And you're seeing very premium prices paid for the right properties. Like even here in Chicago, which is not always on the hit list of, most popular places to go.
Yay.
We've seen record break now that I'm here, maybe it is, but record breaking prices
Mhm.
at some of our properties, especially in up on the North Shore. Like the one recently traded for like $34 million, which is like, sort of an unheard of price, especially for this region. But you're seeing that kind of conviction when people they're seeing that there's something special about that property.
Well, I think some of this flows into the lifetime value of a client, and I talk about that topic often with several of my
Yeah.
clients. Is that I feel like when we entered the big climb, or we won't call it, it's not even a bubble because we're still high. It became more transactional. The relationships became more transactional. With the luxury market space, it's who you know, who you were in the rooms with, and now we're
Yeah.
having to look at the lifetime value of a client because we are seeing properties exchange hands from the older generation to the younger generation who's looking for these advisors, trusted advisors, to keep up.
Yeah.
And so, what are you seeing those advisors do differently to, I don't know, stand out from the noise of anyone that advertises themselves as luxury? What are they having to adjust to get in the room with some of these high net worth or ultra luxury clients?
So, I mean, I think, look, the most important thing is that you have to listen and be patient and think about it as a long-term relationship, as opposed to being excessively transactional, because people can smell when, that's your focus. And especially when we're talking in the luxury space, where some of these purchases are on more on the discretionary side, right? So nobody wants to be pushed and sold. They want to be advised and guided. And so for the the best advisors are really focusing on how to build those relationships, but also they need to demonstrate that they have an elevated level of knowledge. And so you have to become much more conversant just on what the nuances around your particular kind of, real estate is. You actually have to understand what's happening in the global economy. You have to understand what's driving your client, in terms of their personal lives, their financial lives. And what we often say, especially when you're talking at the, at the luxury end, the property is part of a portfolio. It's not just necessarily the one place where they put a roof over their head. And so when you start thinking like an asset manager and an advisor on that kind of mindset,
Mm.
then you approach it in a much higher, at a much higher level than perhaps you do if you're just trying to just move a piece of real estate, because people can feel when that's your primary goal.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it's intentional now. With the buyer is being realistic with their money. They are looking at it as a safe haven, but they're also looking at it as an asset. And so,
Yeah.
for our listeners out there, if you don't have the knowledge in asset management, financial planning, lifestyle choices, be it
Yeah.
yacht distributors or whatever it is, cars, whatever it is that they're into, you have to create those partnerships to keep up, really just to keep up.
Yeah.
And, you're spot on with they're spending their money within the lifestyle too, not just a home. And so being able to have
Yeah.
that conversation with the client is just it keeps you ahead of everyone
Yeah,
else.
and we're seeing more and more of our advisors, they specialize in certain types of lifestyles, because you have to really, you can't fake your way through it, because you got to really understand it, right? So if you're into equestrian, there's a whole range of factors that go into, what would someone be looking for? And if you're looking at waterfront properties, there's a lot more to it.
Mhm.
But I would say that, you know, it's about investing the time to understand who your client is, what kind of clients you're targeting. There's no shortage of resources to help you
Yeah.
get knowledgeable. So
Yeah.
so I think that, it creates a higher level of onus on the advisor themselves
Mhm.
to learn and understand and be able to converse at on these multitude of factors that are broader than before. Obviously, having a global brand such as ours is obviously helpful, because people assume that you're, at the higher end, you know, what you're talking about. So it creates an opening for you. But I would say that, if you're into equestrian, there's a whole range of factors that go into, what would someone be looking for? And if you're looking at waterfront properties, there's no shortage of resources to help you get knowledgeable. So I think that, the onus is on the advisor themselves to learn and understand and be able to converse at on these multitude of factors that are broader than before. Obviously, having a global brand such as ours is obviously helpful, because people assume that you're, at the higher end, you know what you're talking about. but ultimately it's up to you to deliver because the expectation is there, but you then have to deliver against that, and that's where the rubber hits the road.
Yes. Well, in a brand like Christie's too, you encourage the collaboration and cross market support, even internationally, and
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing. Like when you talk about global markets, we are seeing more buyers look globally. We're seeing more and more of that in the United States, and we'll get to that part. But that's what the piece
yeah,
too is. Again, it's you have the resource there, you just have to be willing to tap into it to stay
yeah,
ahead, and I do
yeah,
believe that for a buyer in this market, they are looking at a brand that can help them across many markets. It's not, if they're an investor, they're buying 19 homes in a specific pocket area as
yeah,
rentals, but that's not the buyer we're talking about. One of the
yeah,
things
yeah.
you ping on too often and with this report is the sense of identity and belonging where it's not about wealth anymore. Home buying for high net worth individuals is not about wealth. It's really about identity, belonging. We talked about lifestyle. So how do
Hmm.
you see that showing up in some of the properties that are exchanging hands and how are you helping agents or how are those advisors, how are they helping their clients level up the property through some of those different characteristics like lifestyle?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the one thing you're seeing is that you're seeing expensive properties trade hands outside of the normal, ones that are typically on the list, right? So typically, you'll hear about Palm Beach, Aspen, Beverly Hills, those sort of classic places where there's a lot of very expensive homes and extremely, extremely wealthy people. But now, like I say, this property that I mentioned just, outside Chicago, is obviously a waterfront property, but, had very unique characteristics. But we're seeing people buy, in the Midwest. We're seeing people buy, in other areas that are kind of off the beaten path, but there's always something really unique about that property. It's the size of it or some of the amenities that it have. And it's always there's some lifestyle incorporation that says, okay, I might not think about this geography as being in of itself luxury, but this property is exceptional. And frankly, if you took it somewhere else, it's an irreplaceable kind of property. So it opens up the aperture a lot more, and people are expressing themselves through their real estate the same way as there's so many other ways to express their individuality, and that's really what we're seeing. So it circles back to what we were saying before is that you have to understand what your ultimate goal that your client has. And then the more you know about places to show them, they can be areas that they may not have otherwise thought about. And I think that's the part that's really exciting. And then when you have access to a network, because nobody does this alone. I think that's the other thing that I wanted to kind of reinforce is that when you can bring a local expert to help your clients, if that's what you're far better off than kind of faking your way through it. And it's also people often ask, well, how do you even break into this category? And if you ask people that have done it, normally somewhere along the way they got an opportunity, and the ones who've done really well found somebody who they could collaborate with who had done it before so that they could make sure that they made the best of that opportunity so that it then became a success and a case study and it's taken them to the next level. So you have to be willing to share a little bit to play the long game as opposed to thinking you can do it all by yourself from the very beginning. And I think that's one of the traits that I've certainly seen people when they think back to what was that magical moment that took them to the next level. There's a collaboration moment that took place that really made it happen.
Well, and that speaks to even the independent brokerages out there, and I know you all are a large corporation, but again, you have to get in the rooms with those people that I met you,
Yeah.
and so it's provided
Mm.
additional
Yeah.
opportunity, and again,
Yeah.
you have to continue to get in those rooms to see what other people how they're progressing in the career, how they're progressing in the luxury space, make those connections,
Yeah.
because you're right, we
Yeah.
don't we don't do it alone. One of the biggest metrics I'll say that I followed with NAR is the multi-generational metric. And we've seen that climb, that desire for multi-generational
Mhm.
housing year over year. I think we went from 14% to
Yeah.
17 or 18% this year. I'm going to use a word compounding, right? Where we're seeing
Yeah.
more compounds developed. I think in your
Yeah.
report, you refer to it as bubble living, where
Yeah.
there is more of that happening. It's keeping properties off the market, but we are seeing that growth within that, seeking those self-sufficient environments that offer privacy and control,
Yeah.
which allow for multi-generational with with shared amenities. So do you see this as becoming an even more permanent, piece within the luxury space?
Yeah, we do because, it plays, like you just said, into privacy, security, and people sort of wanting to, have sort of an intergenerational experience with their families. And so we definitely see that across the board, and I don't see that changing, especially if you look at the how the demographics are changing.
Yeah. Well, and in the report, it mentions a property in Polly's Island where great-grandmother owned it, and then it passed to the next generation,
Mm,
to the next generation, to the next
mm,
generation, and then they go buy the land around it and, continue to build additional structures, and I'm with you, especially in some of these, more resort-style areas,
yeah,
continuing to see more of that, and then too, large parcels of land selling, and then it is you can the privacy and control there is,
yeah,
um, always there. You're not buying a condo in the center of Chicago, although
yeah.
I'm certain that
The
the weather is beautiful today.
one day it's hot, the next day it's freezing, but today it's sunny. We'll take that. But yes, I think what you were just talking about is, exactly what I mean by, you know, once someone, they zone in on an area, and they're comfortable with it and they like it. They have the resources to continue to expand their presence in there. So, I recently toured a property where it was very similar, kind of dynamic of this accumulation of adjacent lots and over many, many years. So it's not like it happened like instantly. But if you look now, you go, you just could not replicate this today. And so, these are the kinds of your relationships and opportunities that if you stay with that client, you're kind of there for, as you mentioned, lifetime value, but they're really vested in the area and proud of it, and see a future for their, not just always their family, but it's also their friends and their, people who want to come and enjoy, an experience.
Yeah. Well, and with you being in a global, brokerage or international brokerage, we are seeing, like I mentioned earlier, that trend for, not necessarily even high net worth individuals, but more individuals to purchase in countries outside of the United States just for the destination. So, out of respect for you, the South African safari, we'll have to figure out the land for that, and then the villa in France and all the different places. What are you seeing as trending for some of your, markets where you're seeing more action, or up and coming markets that you're seeing more action? Again, not to leave anyone out, but what are you seeing for that across the board globally?
I mean, it is interesting because I think we sometimes sort of, we use a narrow lens for, what luxury is, and but it's actually, it's much broader, and also, there's lots of options. So what you're starting to see are people looking at, you know, there's been a lot of, in Portugal and Spain, even places like Albania. These are sort of, into, Europe and Eastern European places that you actually get very good value. And so, there's a way to actually have your experience, but actually, it's available to a wider audience if you're prepared to be more adventurous in terms of looking at other locations. Now, Costa Rica is really big. We recently brought on a new affiliate in Uruguay, super popular. And there's a part of, the kind of clientele there. If you can be the first to discover a place before it gets discovered, that's kinda cool, as opposed to being sort of the last person to join the party, because by then, frankly, if you're looking at it from an investment perspective, the values have appreciated at that time. So there are, if you take the time, there are so many places in the world to be able to experience whatever that next stage of life that you want to achieve. Because, a beautiful sunset is a beautiful sunset, whether you're looking at it out of a $500,000 condo or a $20 million property. There is a way to access these things if you actually kind of look at what is most important to you.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting. For me, I ditched the when I get hit by a bus mindset, and it's always when I win the lottery and move to Costa Rica. I've been
Yeah,
saying that for years and years. So I think I'm just trying to
yeah.
manifest it at some point. So probably should get one of your advisors shopping
I've got
for
a
me
good
or
friend, and
something.
he did, yeah, and he went there early. He went there early, so now it's like he's got a great property, and so credit to him for being there early.
Well, it's interesting. We
But it's
went.
interesting,
Go ahead.
even the way that there's also a life cycle to it, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people don't buy right away. They visit, they rent, they experience, they go to different spots so that when they are ready to go, they're informed, right? Like,
Mhm.
'cause these are big decisions. And so, that's another avenue where, one needs to look at sort of a relationship
Mhm.
is, if you can help your client, experience it through a rental versus always be thinking about, I'm only going to do it when they're ready to buy. Well,
Right.
there's a process that people go through before they make that final decision, especially if it's a secondary home
Mhm.
or a brand new country that they haven't been into. I mean, so it's all playing the long game.
Yeah. Well, no, I recently, well, I'll say within the past year and a half, I took up pickleball. And part of the pickleball was to get in front of the boomers, right? Because that's often where the money
Yeah,
lives. The other side is just to have
yeah,
a hobby. I met a woman there who they have gone to New Zealand. This will be their fourth year in a row. And they've picked different
yeah,
times of the year to go, and they'll stay for 3 months.
hmm,
And they'll pick up work
yeah,
while they're there, just, small jobs.
hmm,
She works in the hospital, so sometimes picks up those types of jobs and like you said, travel around New Zealand to see what type of
hmm,
area where they would wanna settle
yeah,
down, and I think by next year, they'll have purchased something, and that's what's
yeah,
really interesting, like you're saying, is it's not a, "I'm going to New Zealand and I'm going to buy a house," it's, "I'm going to New Zealand and I'm gonna live in this community or this community and this and I'm gonna try
yeah,
winter, spring, summer, and fall, and then I'm going to
yeah,
decide, is that where I want to be, or do I just want to move to Portugal?"
yeah,
So
yeah,
it is an interesting mindset now because we can travel, we can go explore these different
yeah,
areas and take up residence. So
yeah. I
let's
mean, I've got a live example with a family member who made the decision to move to Italy. But they're renting in different areas, and then they'll make a final decision. I mean, they're at the retirement stage, but that's
Mhm.
what we were talking about before is that there's way more options for people who look at it as what they can do with retirement beyond, for some people
Mhm.
being in Florida, that's where they want to do the retirement. For others, they want a different cultural experience in a different country. And so I think people are thinking much more internationally now than maybe they were before.
Mhm. I agree. Let's lean into the advisor side for just a few minutes. When you think about how
Sure.
these elite advisors are staying ahead of the curve, and we talked a little bit about, them being knowledgeable, what are some of
Mm,
the specific tactics you're seeing them leverage either on marketing properties or on they've already captured the client to work with these properties? In my mind, I'm thinking as I'm talking, I'm thinking more on the listing side. What are you seeing as different
mhm.
types of tactics to promote the properties and get those in front of additional potential buyers being, you know, global?
Right. Well, what I'm seeing at the elite level is, there's an old statement in marketing from going way back to, I think it was John Wanamaker who said, "I know that only half of my marketing is working. I just don't know which half." um, so today that's sort of changed because you actually can track and measure a lot more than you could before. But it's taking a much more targeted approach to how to market a property versus just kind of blanketing everywhere. And sometimes I think it can look easy because you just throw up a video on social media and you think you've exposed it to a lot of people. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of noise and we all kind of scroll right through it. The more intentional ones are thinking about who the targeted buyer is, and they're developing profiles of what that buyer looks like. And this is sort of gets us back to the whole lifestyle. conversation that we're having, because when you start to get into the psyche of what that buyer looks like, then you start to say, I'm going to actually overinvest, in going direct to that kind of clientele, whether it's through my network, whether it's through the kind of local publications or the lifestyle publications, and really market the property that way versus just putting out there for everybody to see. Because the reality is that the audience is a lot tighter, and the ones you want are probably going to miss it. So I think what it's done is really make people have to think a lot more carefully about targeting versus just doing it, really sort of mass market. But because mass market feels so easy and you can say, well, so many people will see it because it's on my Instagram feed. Well, the truth is, most of them aren't buyers. I mean, you look at the stats of people visiting all the various portals, and it's like tens of millions of people every single month, and we trade 4.5 million properties a year. So I think it's about being really focused about who that buyer actually looks like. And that's what I see certainly from, on the luxury side, is that what the clients are looking for is that you've got a story to tell and a way to get it to the right people. So PR is another big, a big tool that we use. Obviously, if it's a property that's of significant notoriety, it's great to get it in the right kind of publications. But there's a sort of a story that needs to be told. There's something about it that makes it super interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that goes
So
back
it's
to the
much more focused than just scattergun would be if I were to sort of summarize it into one major theme.
yeah. Well, and that goes back to promoting not just the property itself through a great video, it's promoting the lifestyle that the property brings.
Yeah.
Um, I
And sometimes you have to bring people out there to really see it and feel it because, in today's world with the tools we have, there's no excuse for something not to be beautiful and the photography not to be great and the video. Like they all should be. I mean, that's like table stakes these days. It's really how you bring that to life and getting it in front of the most critical audience. That's really where the magic is.
Yeah. Well, I always say when the MLS or some of these videos create a scratch and sniff sticker, that might be the next level, so that then we don't actually have to walk into the home. And I always say with my marketing, I'm selling homes, so it must not be the marketing, it must be your property. Like you said, it's 50%. I don't know which 50%. I said, it works. I'm still selling properties. It can't be the marketing. Um, when you think, and I know you are spearheading your group for like the top 1% of agents in Christie's, similar to Sotheby's has the market leader, and then there's the Realm Global Network. Really, with these advisors who truly possess these high net worth or luxury type of buyers, do you find benefit in that? And then, what types of topics are you bringing to them, or are you sharing with them that you feel like help them sell that home that they may have as a listing?
Sure. So, this sense of community is really important for, for our agents. And so we have two main um, circles for our agents. One is called the Master Circle,
Yes.
and that brings our top agents globally, and but every affiliate nominates a group of people to be part of it. So what's really fabulous about it is that when you're in Master Circle, these are very elite agents, but you have someone from every single company across all
Wow.
50 countries that we're in that are part of it. And what we've done with that group is we've created a concept called salons. And it's a monthly series where they're in really small groups, and we pick very specific topics for them to discuss. And then we're using AI to take stock of all of the dialogue that happens on those calls, and then we're synthesizing it, and then we're giving it back to the group and saying, here are the main insights that came from these sessions, and here's your action steps that you can derive from it. So we're using it very much to leverage the power of the network. And then we have another group that we call the council.
Okay.
And the council is sort of for the agents that are 100 million plus on
Mhm.
average or more. And that's a group of about 42 agents that, I personally curate myself in terms of spending time with. And we had a kickoff session with them. They actually all came to Chicago in February. So that was sort of the first test was
They are brave.
if you're serious about your business, you will come to Chicago in February. And we had an incredible 2 days on a whole variety of topics, workshops that were really catered towards their kind of clientele. So the way we look at it is we want everybody to have a fantastic career inside Christie's International Real Estate, but you need to provide them with the right environment and the right network and opportunities to meet them where they're at and take them to the next level. And so a lot of it is putting the right people in the right rooms together.
Mhm.
Super important for us. And that's where inspiration comes when we were talking before. How do you break into some of these things? It's because you've learned from somebody who's done it before, or you've learned something from a peer that's in a, in a different market. So I find that super exciting and tons of fun to do.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'll just throw it out here on the show. When you're ready to have me either at either one of the events, then you let me know and we'll
You
see
got
what
it.
kind of workshop we can put together.
Awesome.
And I
Yeah,
agree
that'd be
with you
great.
that networking, and I go where, it was probably it's probably been 7 or 8 years ago when sports and entertainment became a big thing and agents started
Yeah.
specializing in sports and entertainment. Um, and that started, like you said, in one of those rooms where somebody came up with it, somebody excelled at it, and then an
Yeah.
advisor shared it. And that's where I see with a
Yeah.
lot of these organizations, to me, it doesn't matter what brokerage you're with or what franchise you're with, independent. You have
Mhm.
to offer that for your next level agent because at some point they are hitting their ceiling, hitting their head on the
Yeah.
ceiling of what they can do in your space. And so that to
Yes.
me,
Yeah.
continuing that.
And what I often, the way I sort of the analogy that I use it when you're dealing with agents that are at this level, it's usually not like some basic obvious thing that they're missing because they're too good for that. I look at it like I know you have a background in athletics and things of that nature. So I look at like the Olympics, right?
Mhm.
So it was very timely because we had this session in February, it was right before the Winter Olympics. And I was like, anyone going to the Olympics is an elite athlete. Like they are like these people are not like trying to figure out the basics. Yet we're going to see, races won and lost in fractions of seconds of seconds, right? So the difference between that, some of it's mindset, some of it is a slight tweak, but nobody's there still trying to figure out the basics. So when we host these things, it's pay attention to a small detail or a nuance because you're too good to need some really fundamental thing. And we had a really interesting thing happen at the session that we had here in Chicago, because these are all obviously very elite agents. And I got an unsolicited note from one of the participants who picked up a small kind of nuance to a pitching a piece of business. And she was pitching against two other agents for a property. It was a legitimate pitch. It wasn't like she was connected to the seller. She had to win it on her own merits. And so she followed kind of what this other agent had talked about doing. And she sent me a note to say that she sent the whole package ahead of time, got a phone call from the client who said that they had canceled the other two interviews. Just bring the paperwork. And she said, like, this has literally never happened. And we're talking about a very, very, accomplished agent. But it was listening for a very small nuance. And then what I always say, it's actually doing something about it. Like it's easy to hear. And I think a lot of people go to things and they listen and then they go back to their day to day,
Yeah.
but you actually have to apply it
Mhm.
and you'd be surprised what can happen.
Well, and that's what they say, that the majority of the attendees in the room don't apply anything, and then you have like the three people that actually go and execute, and and to be honest, that's why coaches are so valuable because there's that accountability to execute, and it can be a great idea all day long, and if you're not implementing it into the business to create enterprise value, it was worth nothing. So, yeah, I mean, and I love that you get the feedback, and that's always my favorite. Just when I have clients come back from conferences, I'll say, "Okay, what is the one or two thing? What are the one or two things that you are going to implement?" And we add it to the goal board. Where is it going to hit Q1, 2, 3, 4? And then it allows me to hold them accountable to those because, like you said, that one micro change
Yeah,
led her to more transactions.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because everyone's looking for a quick fix, right? We're an instant gratification society. But I think, that's the other thing is that, um, none of the people that are really successful, it was never instant. Like, it took time,
Mhm.
where you just get to see the end result of their work and think it's easy. But, that's the exception. The norm is it's hard work.
Yeah, it's the grind every day, and, I say comparison is the killer of joy, and if
Yeah.
you're comparing yourself to that person, like you said, you're in 100,000,000 plus, and I'm at 100,000,000 and that person's at 500,000,000, I'm sitting there going, "Oh, but I'm working," you start to compare, you gotta
Yeah.
get out of your head and take the one thing from that $5,000,000 producer
Yeah.
and implement it and become a $200,000,000 producer and a 300,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's we always look at the end and go, "Why can't I be there?" But we don't take into consideration all of the steps they took to get there, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, talent is certainly an important characteristic, but the people who are talented usually have to work really hard, because you can't just get by on talent alone.
Mhm. Well, I want to talk about growth a little bit. So, Christie's has experienced quite a bit of growth when you talk about talent.
Yeah.
I follow you on social media, your LinkedIn page,
Mhm.
introducing amazing talent that you're bringing into the organization across the globe. So, tell me what's leading the charge on that?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's like it's been really cool. Like, in 2025, we added 24 new affiliates. So there were 9 in the Americas and 14 in EMEA and APAC. But what's really exciting about it is it's a combination of existing affiliates expanding into new markets, which I love, because there's no better endorsement of the partnership and the brand is when you see an existing affiliate increase their investment and go to new markets that we can do together. And then, of course, there's some wonderful new geographies that we get to add to our global network. So, I think what's driving it is a lot of what we were talking about at the very beginning of our conversation is that I believe we offer a really great combination of the best, which is a globally recognized brand in the eye of the consumer, fantastic resources that are really hard to build and get on your own, but preserving local culture and independent operation and ownership, which is a very attractive combination. And so the more we can tell our story and the more we can get out there and people can see how we can help them grow their business, that's what's starting to resonate, and why I feel so good about the growth that we have on tap, and fortunately the growth that we've had over the last little bit.
Yeah. Well, and when you and I met, you were with Peerage Realty and really leaning in on mergers and acquisitions. That was a key piece of your role. And as I see you continue to grow, you're living somewhat in your sweet spot, which is fun to observe. And in this market, we are seeing a bit more of the merger and acquisition piece. It could be because of larger organizations rolling in, independents wanting to roll out. So when you think about just from a merger and acquisition standpoint, you think about those individuals who are considering whether it's a franchise agreement's up or independent, thinking about exiting. What factors are you seeing impact values right now, and what is it that um, companies out there looking to acquire are really looking for? And I do get this question often, so this is a true
Yeah.
true live question for
Okay.
you.
All right. Well, so here's what I would say. The first thing is, and there's a lot of analogies to like real estate transactions. So, in real estate, what's the number one rule? Location, 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 right? So in M&A, I say it's leadership, leadership, leadership. Like, the most important thing, from my time in M&A, not just in this industry, but in others, the first and most important thing is leadership, because no matter how much you can plan for the future and have the there's ups and downs. And so you have to understand, how is that leader or partner that you're going to be with lead you through the inevitable ups and downs that come with just being in business today. So that's a very, very important thing in the eyes of anyone doing the acquisition, on the acquisition side. And then you can use a lot of analogies that tie to, if you were staging a home. Like, if you don't bother keeping it clean and you don't, and it looks messy and untidy, you're asking the buyer to work a lot harder. So if your books and records are a mess, if it's hard for you to find information, your buyer doesn't want to have to come in and clean up your mess. And if it feels like they're going to discount the value of of your business, and they're going to look at things like your retention rates, your all those kind of metrics, and how stable have you been over the years. But I would say the one sort of big disconnect that there often is between a seller and the buyer, depending on the size of the business, is if the seller is the major producer and accounts for most of the revenue, they think they have a business, but they actually don't. They've got more of a practice. And the biggest challenge you have is in valuing the business, because they look at their production and kind of what they just keep in the company as being what the company makes. But post closing, that's not what the company makes, because they're going to take their split, whatever that looks like. And so they need to put themselves into the shoes of the buyer and see what those economics look like. That's probably the biggest friction point that I've seen in some of these M&A things over the years, is that kind of disconnect.
Yeah. And when I'm talking with or speaking with brokerages that are questioning, is this a path I should take? That's always the first thing I look at is what percentage of the business is yours and how are you paying yourself? Because oftentimes you're spot on. The majority stakeholder of the company is the owner of the company. And I love how you said the business versus practice. Like that's something I'm going to adopt and take away from this is, do you actually have a practice? And you can see that in the medical industry, accounting, attorneys, like that truly is it a practice? With leadership, because you said leadership, 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 are you seeing more of the request to keep leadership in place or to remove leadership as these companies are acquired?
Yeah. Look, it very much depends on, the strategic rationale for doing the deal in the first place. So, you know, in my sort of prior experience, for the most part, we were dealing with people who we wanted to stay on. That was the whole reason for getting into business with them in the first place. But there are other times where, it's more of like kind of a roll in, which is, I already have established leadership. We're just looking at a small firm. And if they come on in with us, actually, there could be overlap with some of the leadership, and that becomes, part of the value. So I think it really depends on what the motivation is behind both the buyer and the seller of what they're looking to achieve. But I still think, you go through a period of transition, you're going to need, even if you're rolling things in, you're going to need leadership on the other side to make sure that you retain everybody. So whether it's for a short term or a long term, that's dependent on the overall strategy of both parties that are at the table, but it comes into play one way or the other.
Mhm. Well, and I'll take a second and plug Philip Cantrell. We both know him. You introduced me to him years ago. He recently wrote a book, "Failing My Way to Success," I believe, and he talks about his transition from where he was over to United. And it to me, I actually have sent that book to several of my brokerages to say, "Hey, it's a playbook, you and that, like you're saying, learning from others who have led the charge. If you're listening, go ahead and download that book. It is a great resource of the way leadership works, the way structuring works, how you look at a deal, who you're looking to partner with, and to me, such a great resource. So now I'll have to plug to
Yeah,
see if
it's
we
funny
get
you
him
say
on the
that because,
show.
yeah, sure. I mean, because it's an interesting thing, because in working with entrepreneurs over the years, and I would say all of the agents are entrepreneurs as well. I would always, the dialogue I would always have with my partners, and I have with our affiliates right now is, they say that, one should learn from one's mistakes, right?
Mhm.
Which is true, but it's even cheaper to learn from someone else's mistake. So, uh, that way you don't even get to have to make it. So talk to someone that's made that mistake and that's willing to share it, because it'll save you a whole lot of heartache.
Okay, we're going to make that a screensaver. It's cheaper to learn from someone else's mistake. I love it. That's
Yes.
perfect. You're absolutely correct. Well, Gavin, I could talk to you for ages. One final question. When you look ahead, what will separate these advisors and brokerage companies that remain relevant in the next phase? And we'll go of the luxury market as we're seeing these different shifts.
So, there's no rocket science to this thing. I think you've got to look at this as a long-term play. You've got to be really focused on what your niche is. You can't be everything, to everybody. You're going to need to embrace technology. It's, your clients are using it. Everybody is, and it's finding the right fit of how that goes into the mix. But I would say don't lose touch of the individuality and the human side of what still continues to be a very large material transaction and a very personal one for your clients.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And for those of
Oh,
you
it's been
listening,
fun.
yes,
Yeah.
we're going to include the Global Luxury Perspectives report in the show notes. So if you're interested in taking a look at that information, become the smartest person in your room, in your office, share that information. Great content there. And Gavin, it is a true pleasure to see you. I can't wait to see you in the year
Absolutely.
ahead at some of these
Yeah.
conferences. I appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable, and I look
Awesome. Well, thank you. This was fun. Thank you so much for hosting me.
you are welcome. We'll see you soon.
Mhm.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.